Hello and welcome to another episode of A Slice of Health, the Candid Health Chat podcast, where we slice away health truth from health fiction. Join me and my friends as we challenge common health myths via chit chat, powered by several cups of coffee. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on social media, and do visit us at asliceofhealth.club. Let's get to today's episode. On today's episode, we discuss health, diet, and boosting the immune system with Tai Ibitoye, a registered UK dietitian and doctoral researcher. You can find her on Instagram at Tai Talks Nutrition, where she debunks myths related to diet, nutrition, and health. On this episode, we explore what it means to boost the immune system and if at all that is possible, why we chase from diet to diet, and she also explores why drinking Supermalt every day is perhaps not a great idea. Welcome, Tai, to the episode. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, sure. So my name is Tai. I am a registered dietitian and a researcher based in London. What I do on a typical working day is quite varied. So sometimes I see patients with different medical conditions like type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, liver disease, cancer. I see them all. And I basically provide advice on dietary treatments to help manage their conditions and also help them meet their nutritional requirements. So that's what I do sometimes. And then other times I'm involved in diet and nutrition related research. And other times I teach undergraduate students who are studying nutrition. So that's a bit about me. I'm also active on social media. So I have an Instagram page called Tai Talks Nutrition, and I basically debunk some nutrition myths and also provide some evidence-based nutrition information.
That's awesome. That is absolutely fantastic. And talking about the research part of things, I've been reading a bit about vitamin D, especially now in the COVID-19 pandemic, Black and ethnic minority groups. Are you able to shed any light on what exactly is going on with that?
Yeah, so my current research is not on vitamin D. When I was doing my master's for my thesis, I did look at vitamin D, but more so looking at vitamin D status in Caucasian women and Southeast Asian women, and seeing if there was any associations between low vitamin D status and immune function, which obviously now is quite I guess it's quite fitting now. I did that research years ago, and it's quite interesting to see new studies looking at the role between vitamin D and it basically reducing the risk of certain infections, more so respiratory infections like COVID-19. And this current research is quite new, but based on this research, there's been some updates in certain guidelines, especially in Ireland, where they are encouraging people to take daily vitamin D supplements containing 20 micrograms of vitamin D.
That's higher than the normal
yes,
isn't it, the 20 micrograms?
Yes, so in the UK, current guidelines says that we should take 10 micrograms of vitamin D, and in Ireland it's obviously a bit higher, and I think it's to do with where Ireland is located. I think where Ireland is located, they don't really get much sunlight exposure, and obviously with the whole like social distancing, social isolation, people have to stay indoors, so we're not really exposed to sunlight. So I think with Ireland, they've increased the amount to 20 micrograms, but in the UK, or in London here, there isn't any guidance that we should increase our vitamin D dosage. But based on that research, actually, researchers said that there isn't any harm in people increasing their vitamin D doses between 20 to 50 micrograms. It's actually safe. So if individuals do choose to increase their dosage, then they can do so. It's not going to affect their health. It's not going to give them any adverse effects. So yeah.
Okay, so that's quite interesting to hear. So obviously that means that, the 20 micrograms on a daily basis could not then lead to vitamin D toxicity if you're keeping it
Yeah.
just at that level. And I suppose that is quite good, good information as well.
Yeah.
And obviously other things that have come out with the COVID-19 pandemic, unfortunately, have been quite a lot of WhatsApp messages.
Yes.
On, the family groups, I'm Nigerian, and all the mothers and aunties always send you these forwarded messages. Unfortunately, you can't block your mums and aunties.
No, you can't. No, I've been tempted to, but no, you can't.
But what exactly is this about boosting your immune system? And is that actually a thing? Can you boost your immune system, and can you do it with diet?
Yeah. So I think it's just so boosting is the incorrect term to use, because you can't really boost the immune system. I mean, the immune system is a very complex system that involves different chemicals, different nutrients, and you can't really boost, the functioning of the immune system. And I think in terms of people sending messages, I've got quite a few messages about garlic, about lemon, it boosting the immune system. And I think people have just been misinformed. So let me just start that there isn't a single nutrient, food, or supplement that can protect you from the virus. And there isn't a single food, nutrient, or supplement that can actually boost the immune system. I think the right terminology to use is that there are certain foods that can support the immune system but not boost the immune system. And there are different foods that provide us with different nutrients that are essential in supporting the immune system. And I think with certain foods, like, for example, I received quite a lot of messages about garlic, and garlic doesn't boost the immune system, but garlic contains important minerals that are needed to maintain the immune system, like copper, and also like vitamin C, which are very important. And also, when you actually eat things like garlic, you're not actually getting the full recommended daily intake of copper or vitamin C. You'll need to eat different types of food in order to get that maximum amount. And also with lemon as well, I've heard lots of information about lemon, which is really good for the immune system. And it is to an extent because it contains vitamin C, and vitamin C is very essential for the immune system. But one slice of lemon contains about 2 milligrams of vitamin C. Adults in the UK need about 40 milligrams of vitamin C. So you can't really get all your vitamin C by eating lemon or you putting lemon in hot water. It doesn't work like that. And actually, when it comes to lemon, I've also received quite a few messages that you need to put lemon in hot water. It helps to boost the immune system. But vitamin C is very sensitive to heat. So even if you put lemon in hot water, you can actually lose some of the vitamin C, because obviously lemon is very heat sensitive. So there isn't one single food or supplement that can actually help to support the immune system. We need to eat different types of foods in order to do so.
And that is actually great. And that brings us on to the rest of the conversation that we're going to have in terms of talking about how we eat and why we eat, and the kind of things that we eat and what we put in our diet. So my first question to you is, why do we eat? Why do we eat food?
Yep. Okay. So we eat food for different reasons. Essentially, we need food to improve our general health. Different foods provide different benefits. So some foods are essential for our cardiovascular health. Some foods are essential for our eye health. Some foods are essential for our digestive health. So we need to eat foods for our general well-being and for our general health. Food is also a source of enjoyment as well. So there's quite a lot of focus on the health benefits of food, but food also provides us enjoyment. It gives us that social feeling. Sometimes when people eat food, they eat food with their families, they eat food with their friends, and it gives you that element of social well-being. We also eat food for our mental health, so we know that there are foods that contain important nutrients for our mental well-being. So we eat food for different reasons, and it's not just about health. So yeah.
And that's great in terms of talking about eating food for enjoyment, because that then brings us into sort of dieting culture and why we diet. Especially, we have a lot of people. I have a friend who's a serial dieter, and between last year and this year, she's been on 4 different diets, and she's not lost any weight. But it's always about trying to lose weight and trying to do the new fad. Why do you think that people are so keen on trying lots of different diets to either lose weight or health beliefs?
There are different reasons for that. So one reason is that we currently live in a world where diet culture is very prevalent.
Yeah.
And diet culture, in terms of the definition of it, is basically a system of different beliefs, practices, and behaviors that people have created. And this is based on the idea that being thin, losing weight, is basically a reflection of good health, self-worth, respect, discipline. People feel like if they lose weight, they may feel happier. And also with this whole diet culture as well, it basically gives people the idea that if you're not thin or if you're overweight or obese, that basically you're doing something wrong. And diet culture is very common on social media platforms. So there are a lot of social media influencers, celebrities who are pushing this culture, pushing it to other people, and it's quite wrong. And people who do follow these social media influencers and celebrities, they feel like they need to lose weight in order to look like them or in order to feel good, which is quite sad actually. And with this diet culture as well, it basically encourages people to be on certain diets, so restrict certain food groups, and also it also demonizes certain food groups as well. So some people say carbs are bad for you, and stay away from fats, and it praises certain foods as well. And I think it just causes a lot of confusion amongst other people in terms of what they should be eating and what they shouldn't be eating. And hence why people go on different diets, because with diet culture, things change and things come on trend on different days, different weeks. So maybe one day the keto diet is a big thing and it's a thing that people want to do, and then maybe the following week it's a low carb diet that is hot at the moment, and people want to start being on that diet. So with diet culture, things changes, and there are different trends that people feel like they need to follow, which is quite harmful.
Yeah. And in terms of picking a diet, so why do you think people pick certain diets? So obviously with the keto diet, it's all about trying to minimize how much carbs you're having and having diet and a dietary intake of things that are higher in fat content. And there's been a bit of research into, probably quite anecdotal really, in terms of a ketotic diet being able to reverse diabetes in some people. And obviously you then have quite a lot of people then driving themselves towards that diet and then having dire consequences. What would you say to people before they pick any one of these diets, especially because we don't know how anyone's respond to it on the other side?
Yeah. So from what I've seen, the reasons why people tend to follow certain diets is based on another person's success story. So I know the keto diet, there's quite a few people, well, a lot of people who've been very successful in that diet, who've lost a lot of weight, and people think that, okay, if that person's lost X amount of weight, that means I can. And people need to know that one size doesn't fit all when it comes to nutrition.
Yeah.
So what works for one person might not actually work for another person, and it can be potentially dangerous as well. So people need to know that dietary needs differs from person to person. You know, people may have different medical conditions, different risk factors, different body compositions, different cultures, religion, ethical values that can actually inform their dietary choices. And so before people actually follow a certain diet, they need to actually consult with their GP or a health professional like a dietitian to see if it's actually safe for them to follow certain diets. I have read news articles on people who followed certain diets, and they've had poor health outcomes as a result of it. And so it's really important that people know that, you know, one size doesn't fit all, and just because somebody did well on a certain diet doesn't mean that they will actually get the same results. Because how we are made, our bodies are completely different. How we metabolize certain foods is completely different. How we tolerate certain foods is completely different. And so we need to know that our bodies are different, our bodies are unique, and we all need different dietary needs as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's quite important. And obviously, every time we talk about diets, that as I was mentioning about, you know, a friend of mine switching between lots of different diets in the span of 12 months, how I always find that whenever I meet people who are dieting in terms of on a specific diet, so whether it's the Cambridge diet or Newcastle diet, you know, Atkins diet from several years ago, I feel as though they always jump from one diet to another. Is there a reason for that? And is there a way to sort of predict who is going to then become someone who jumps between diets?
Yes. So I think with any diet, any restrictive diet, it's not always sustainable.
Yeah.
And that's why some people, they tend to do well within the first couple of days or even the first couple of weeks, and then they fall off because, you know, you can't sustain, it's not sustainable at all. And so people will lose weight, and then when they've stopped being on that diet, they will gain the weight back on. And then they will associate the fact that they've gained weight with that diet and feel like, okay, maybe I wasn't really successful on that diet, let me try another diet. And then the cycle just continues. They will lose weight, and because the diet is not sustainable, they will stop that diet, they will gain the weight back on, and then they want to try another new diet that will give them that weight loss effect. And then it's just a continual cycle. So I think because diets in general are not sustainable and people do not stick to it long term, they tend to just jump from one diet to another diet.
And seeing as diets are not sustainable, then in that situation, you're not then going to be able to stick to a specific diet, especially a restrictive one. What would you then recommend that our diet should actually look like? So when I say our diet, I mean what we eat. What should that actually look like to avoid this restrictive pattern of jumping from one inefficient diet to another?
Yeah. So for the general population, we should follow a diet that is based on the Eat Well guide. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, actually. I'm sure you have anyway. But basically, the Eat Well guide shows us how much we should eat overall from different food groups in order to achieve a healthy, balanced diet. And so with the Eat Well guide, there are different components of it. So different food group components. So one of the food group components is fruits and vegetables, and the government advised that we should have at least 5 portions of fruits and vegetables a day. One portion is about 80 grams, which is basically the size of the palm of your hand. So in total, we should have about 400 grams of fruits and vegetables a day. So that's something that we should be including in our diet on a daily basis. Another thing that we should be including in our diet, which is based on the Eat Well guide, is starchy carbohydrates. And I know there are some people who say, oh, carbs is the enemy, carbs is bad for you. But actually, carbs is one of the main sources of energy. We get most of our energy from eating carbohydrates. And also it contains important minerals like iron, and it also contains fiber, which is needed for our gut health. So starchy carbohydrates are foods that we should include in our diet, and where possible we should include whole grain versions, so things like brown rice, brown pasta, brown bread, bulgur wheat, lentils, and things like that. Those are the things that we should be including in our diet. Another component of the Eat Well guide is dairy and dairy alternatives, and these are good sources of calcium, which is needed for our bones and for our teeth. So including things like milk, yogurt, cheese, dairy alternatives are things like soya milk, soya yogurt, tofu. These are things that we should be including in our diet. And also we should be basing our diet around protein, so including protein food sources like beans, pulses, fish, eggs and meat. But when it comes to meat, actually, we should be more mindful on how much meat we are actually eating, because we know that regular meat consumption can increase the risk of bowel cancer. And so we should be more mindful on how much we're actually eating. So those are the main food components that we should be including in our diet. And then just general things like being more mindful of foods that contain a lot of fat, a lot of sugar, and a lot of salt. And we should be eating these things less often and in small amounts, because what we do know is that a regular consumption of high fat, salt, and sugary foods can increase our risk of chronic diseases. And so it's not to say you shouldn't eat it at all, but I like to say moderation is key. And also ensuring good hydration. So making sure that you are staying hydrated, drinking lots of fluids. The Eat Well guide suggests that we have between 6 to 8 glasses of water a day. Well, not water, fluids a day, but ideally it's being water. But then if people choose not to drink water, because I know there are some people who don't like the taste of water, and I'm just like, huh? I didn't know you can taste water, but okay. But when it comes to fluids, maybe having things like low calorie juices, teas and coffee can contribute towards your fluid intake. Soups also contains a lot of fluids, so having lots of soups, having lots of stews, and even fruits. Some fruits have a high water content, like strawberries, watermelon, melon. So having more of those in your diet.
Yeah, and I think in terms of water drinking as well, I think that often is because people are used to the taste of sweet drinks. And I think when you're so used to the taste of pop, Coca-Cola, juice, wine, cocktails that are all really high in sugar content, when you then drink something that is bland, like water, that like it has no taste, it feels quite foreign to you. And I think
and I think and I 100% agree with you, actually. And I think there are some things that people can do. So when they're having their water, they can infuse it with fruits, like strawberries and lime, lemon, to give it that sweet taste, which is an option for individuals who don't like the taste of water.
And I was going to ask you a few questions actually about a few specific things, but I'm going to ask you a question about something you've not mentioned yet. And being a Nigerian, I'm obsessed with malt.
Super malt.
And it's just because, you know, a few decades ago, they used to say to women that were pregnant at the time that, you know, they should have a glass of Guinness daily because it contained quite a lot of nutrients. And now you then have alternatives to the alcoholic forms of Guinness, which is basically sort of the malt drinks that we have. Where do you stand with malt drinks? Because I think they are quite also high in sugar, but they also have different sort of nutritional contents as well. So could you speak about that?
Yes. So super malt is quite high in sugar. One bottle, which is about 330 mils, contains 42.2 grams of sugar, and that's equivalent to about 10 sugar cubes. And this is quite high. This is very high because in terms of the UK recommendation, adults living in the UK, we should have no more than 30 grams of free sugars a day. And so imagine if somebody drank one bottle of super malt, they're literally exceeding their recommended sugar intake. It is quite high in sugar, and I think it's a hard one because this is not to say that people shouldn't drink super malt at all. They can, but perhaps they can limit the amount that they do drink. So instead of drinking the whole bottle, maybe have half the bottle of super malt and then the other half the following day, because for some individuals, they can be drinking that super malt and then they can be eating other foods that contain a lot of sugar, and you know, you're increasing your sugar intake, and which is not really good for your health. So I think it's just being more mindful on how much you're actually drinking. I know that super malt actually have a less sugar version.
Oh, really?
Yes, but I haven't seen it in the shops, but I know on their website, the super malt website, and there's a less sugar version, and I think that contains about 25 grams of sugar. But even so, that's still quite high considering that, you know, we should have no more than 30 grams of sugar a day. So you're kind of, you know, having most of your sugar intake by drinking that drink. So I think, you know, individuals should just limit their consumption of super malt if they can.
That's quite interesting because when you started talking about the super malt and how much sugar it actually contained, I was actually looking at my preferred malt drink because I actually prefer malt Guinness.
Okay.
And just looking on here on their website, it actually says that carbohydrates of which sugars is actually 16 grams in per 100 mils. And I think that probably comes to about the same because each bottle is about 330 mils. So it probably comes to about the same as super malt, really. So it does seem like a lot of all these malt drinks are actually quite high in sugar. And that's probably because of the way they're made, because they're made from barley, aren't they? And obviously that is a carbohydrate. But coming back to the Eat Well guide, there's been some criticism of the Eat Well guide because it's not been revised for a few years. And, you know, obviously with social media, lots of online nutritionists, online doctors, online gastroenterologists, and it's now, I think in the UK, we were sort of separated from the US in terms of the things that they did, but now with social media and the internet and Instagram, we all it's everything. It's just all one national village, really, an international village. And there's been a lot of hate towards dairy. Is there anything that you can say to that? So in terms of like animal dairy and sort of milk, cheese, those kind of things, there's been a lot of, you know, negative press around it, saying that actually it is a major issue. And obviously we're also seeing a rise in something called cow's milk protein allergy in children as well, which we never really used to see sort of going back sort of 10 years ago when I was getting into medical school. Is there anything that you could say towards that?
Yeah. So yes, there is a lot of negative press around dairy and dairy products. And just to, I guess, answer that question. So first, I'm just going to bust some myths surrounding dairy, and then I will also talk about, I guess, dairy requirements for the UK population as well. So in terms of the myths around dairy, I've heard a lot, such as that dairy is not good for you, it's bad for the heart. There's quite a lot of information online about removing dairy from your diet, especially if you have PCOS or fibroids, and also things like milk contains pus and hormones from the cows, and there's just all sorts of information around dairy, and they are all false. There's no evidence to support these information. And when it comes to food companies, especially in the UK, before a food can be displayed on the shelves, it needs to be regulated. And so if a certain food group was, I guess, unsafe for us, it wouldn't be on the shelves, because with the UK especially, the food organisations, they really do they check all their food products to deem it as safe for the population. And so, yeah, there isn't any health implications of having dairy from your diet. But there are some people who should stay away from dairy. So obviously people who have a dairy allergy, they shouldn't be having dairy in their diet. And also vegans, so people who are on a vegan diet, they would obviously need to restrict dairy from their diet for ethical reasons. But there is a lot of negative press about it. But dairy is actually a really good source of so many vitamins and minerals, such as protein, which is needed for our muscle repairs. It helps us feel stronger, and it also contains B vitamins, which are really essential for our health. It contains iodine, it contains potassium, and all of these are really important for us. Some people do get worried about the fat content of dairy products. So some people think it's high in fat, it's high in calories, but there are actually low fats and low sugar versions of dairy products. So with milk, for example, if you want to go for a healthier option, you can have skimmed milk or semi-skimmed milk, which is lower in calories, or you can have a plant-based milk option like soy milk, almond milk, which is also good for you. So yes, there's quite a lot of negative press about it. I don't think dairy is bad for you at all. It's very rich in vitamins and minerals. But obviously there are people out there who would need to restrict dairy from their diet for ethical reasons or cultural reasons or health reasons. But before people choose to restrict dairy from their diet, they would need to speak to their doctor or a health professional for obviously further advice and guidance.
And what about currently there's quite a lot of promotion of the veganism as well, a lot of hate as well towards sort of animal products, including fish. Is there any actual evidence to say that actually eating meat, red meat, white meat, fish, Does that actually promote cardiovascular disease? Does that actually promote cancer? Because I think the push towards veganism and maintaining sort of an alkaline-based diet now is about people saying that on these kinds of diet, you cannot get cancer and you cannot get sick, which obviously is not absolutely true, because definitely in my practice, I've seen patients who are vegans who have had cancer, who've had all sorts of diseases, who've had heart disease, who've had strokes, who have had, I have a lot of vegan patients who are diabetic and are type 2 diabetic, not even type 1. So where exactly did that come from, and is it based in any evidence at all?
Yeah. So regarding meat, red meat especially, there is some evidence that shows that if you eat meat on a regular basis, that it may increase your risk of bowel cancer. I haven't heard anything about cardiovascular disease as of yet. I think there may be some studies about linking red meat to cardiovascular disease, but I think with bowel cancer, there are a lot of studies linking frequent consumption of red meat to bowel cancer. And that's why currently in the UK, there's guidance that tells us that we should limit our consumption of red meat. So individuals should eat, individuals who eat more than 90 grams of red meat, which is, I guess, 90 grams is basically the size of the palm of your hand. So people who eat more than that should cut down their meat consumption to about 70 grams to reduce the risk of bowel cancer. So that is current UK guidance. And I think people also need to know the differences between red meat, processed meat, and also white meat as well. People tend to categorize meat as one thing. So red meat are meats such as beef, lamb, pork, mutton, goat. So red meat. So we can eat these types of meats, but in moderation. And there's processed meat. And processed meat is the one that we know that if you eat too much of it, it can actually cause bowel cancer. And processed meats are meats such as sausages, bacon, ham, salami, some canned meats like corned beef. So these are processed meats, and we know that regular consumption of red meat and processed meats can, or may rather, cause bowel cancer. But meats like chicken, turkey, goose, rabbits, there isn't any evidence to suggest that if you eat these type of meat, that it would cause bowel cancer or even cardiovascular disease. But what people should be mindful of is how they prepare and how they cook these meats. So we know that some meats are quite high in fat, and that's because they have a lot of fat surrounding it. So when people are cooking these type of meats, they should remove any visible remove any visible fat around the meat before they cook it and before they eat it as well, because that fat contains saturated fat, and we know that high intakes of saturated fat can actually increase your risk of cardiovascular disease. So, and I think based on this, I guess, research, or based on these guidelines, people think that, okay, because we need to limit our consumption of red meat, and on the back of that, there's lots of evidence showing that having a plant-based diet is good for you, and it can reduce your risk of lots of chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease and cancer and stroke and type 2 diabetes. And so there's a push for more people to include more plant-based options in their diet and reduce their intake of meat-based food products. And that's not to say that meat is bad for you, because it really isn't. Meat is a very good source of iron. if anything, red meat contains more iron than plant-based options. And obviously we need iron for our blood. We need it for hemoglobin, which helps to transport oxygen around the body. Red meat is also a good source of B vitamins, which people who are on a plant-based diet actually lack. So, red meat isn't bad for you, but we know that it's good to eat things in moderation, and eating too many foods can actually not be good for you. So moderation is key. So with the plant-based diet, it encourages people to eat more fruits and vegetables, includes more whole grains in their diet, more pulses, which lots of studies have shown is good for heart health, it's good for the digestive system, it's good for everything really. But that's not to say that a plant-based diet is healthy, and that's not to say also that a vegan diet is a healthy option, because although it encourages people to eat more plant-based options, people like to, some people like to bend the rules a bit and be like, oh, I can eat a vegan ice cream, it's plant-based, it's healthy for me, but ice cream is ice cream, whether it's vegan or not, it will contain the similar amount of calories that a non-vegan ice cream has. It will probably contain similar amount of sugar, similar amount of fats as well. And so, whether just because foods that are high in fat, salt and sugar is vegan friendly doesn't mean that it's actually healthy. So I think people also need to be more mindful of that. And with plant-based diets as well, it can actually meet all of your nutritional requirements if it's done properly. I feel like people need to be educated on different food groups that contain certain nutrients, because as I mentioned, with red meat, it contains vitamin B12, but there isn't many foods in the plant-based diet that contains vitamin B12. So people need to be more educated, know what foods contains important nutrients, and whether they need to probably supplement missing nutrients in their diet.
That's really interesting to hear as well, in terms of sort of the benefits of plant-based diet, but then also separating different kinds of meat as well. Just because I think there's always sort of this negative press that all meat is bad, but then actually understanding what the contents of each meat is and how much of it you should actually be eating. And if you're eating sausages, bacon, and spam, and that's all your meat, then obviously that is a problem. I'm just trying to understand all of that. That has been absolutely fantastic, Ty. So why don't you give us a championship point for today's episode?
Okay, so number one would be when it comes to nutrition, one size doesn't fit all. And so what works for someone in terms of the diet they were on may not actually work for you. And so it's to know that you shouldn't compare your body composition to someone else. You shouldn't really compare someone's success story. That you should focus on your body, focus on your dietary needs, and seek advice from a nutrition professional, like a dietitian or registered nutritionist, for more guidance and more advice on what you actually need to be eating, whether that's for health reasons or for weight loss reasons. So that's number one. Number two, I guess it's quite fitting for the current situation we're in at the moment that no single food, nutrient or supplement can prevent you from getting coronavirus, and there isn't any specific food or supplement that can boost the immune system, and that people should have more of a healthy and varied diet to support normal immune functioning, rather than eating garlic or putting lemon in their hot water. They should basically have a healthy, balanced diet to support the immune system. A vegan diet is not a healthy diet. There are vegan options of ice cream, pizza as well. Didn't know there's a vegan chicken and chips until somebody told me last week that there's vegan chicken and chips. But yes, a vegan diet is not always a healthy diet. You can have foods that are high in fat, salt, and sugar. And also you need to be careful and be more mindful of the type of foods you are eating, because you might be missing some important nutrients. And so it's just to be more aware, and I guess be more educated on what foods you need to eat that are vegan friendly, that can actually provide you with the nutrition that you need.
That's great. That is awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
No, you're welcome.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode. Do share this podcast with 2 people who have not heard about us before. Remember that this podcast in no way replaces advice from your own doctor or physician. Do subscribe and follow us on social media. Leave us a review on iTunes so that others can access the amazing content. And do join the club at asliceofhealth.club and drop us some suggestions or questions that you might have. Don't forget to be a health champion wherever you go by separating health fact from health fiction.